In the beautiful European country of Netherlands lies the stunning city of Amsterdam, a place famous for its giant canals flowing through the middle of the city. Every year, thousands of tourists visit Amsterdam to enjoy peaceful boat rides and admire the breathtaking views. But one day, this beautiful city was shaken by a terrifying incident that left everyone in fear. That afternoon, several tourists were enjoying a relaxing boat tour through the canals. Everything seemed normal, peaceful, and calm, until suddenly, they noticed the dead body of a young woman hanging beneath a bridge. The horrifying sight instantly sends everyone into panic. People begin screaming, chaos spreads across the area, and within minutes, police officers arrive at the scene to begin their investigation. Days pass, but the police fail to find any solid clue about the murderer. Slowly, fear spreads throughout the entire city because nobody knows who the killer really is, or when he might strike again. Meanwhile, another young woman is peacefully lying on a small rubber boat, enjoying the sunlight in the middle of the canal. She has no idea that something terrifying is silently moving toward her beneath the water. Suddenly, a sharp knife shoots upward from below and slices through the bottom of her boat, but the girl casually ignores it, thinking it was probably caused by a fish or some object underwater. A few moments later, the handle of the knife slowly begins to twist on its own, creating a creepy creaking sound. That's when the girl finally realizes that something is horribly wrong. Nearly 2.5 hours later, the police seal off the entire area and begin searching for the victim's body. Despite his fear, a brave officer puts on a diving suit and enters the dark water to investigate, but instead of finding the body, he discovers a luxurious sunken yacht hidden beneath the canal. Curious to uncover the truth, he carefully enters the yacht and notices a hunting shotgun lying on the floor. As he bends down to pick it up, a pale white hand suddenly appears behind him, terrifying the officer almost to death, but after taking a closer look, he realizes it's only the rotting corpse of a dead woman floating underwater. Up above, the officers waiting on the surface notice bubbles rapidly rising from the water and immediately panic. They begin pulling on the rope attached to the diver, and when he responds, everyone feels relieved for a moment. But the moment the officer moves deeper into the yacht and slowly opens the cabin door, his blood runs cold. Standing right in front of him is the killer himself, holding a blood-soaked knife in his hand. The officer instantly turns and desperately tries to escape, but the rope tied around his body suddenly traps him and becomes the very reason for his horrifying death. Suddenly, the killer grabs the rope and violently pulls the officer toward him. Then, like a complete madman, he starts stabbing him over and over again, turning his entire body into a bloody mess. As the officer struggles in agony, streams of bubbles begin pouring out of his mouth underwater. The officers waiting above instantly realize that something terrible has happened below, and they begin pulling the rope back up with all their strength. But when they finally manage to drag him to the surface, it's already too late. The officer is dead. His body is cold and lifeless. Everyone is still in shock when suddenly the police chief notices something moving rapidly through the water. Without wasting a second, he orders his team to get on the boats and chase it down immediately. The mysterious figure rushes into a blocked section of the canal, and for the first time, the police chief believes the killer has nowhere left to escape. He quickly orders the canal gates to be sealed and brings in hundreds of powerful water pumps to drain the entire canal. Hours later, as the water level finally drops close to empty, the police chief is left completely stunned by what he sees. There was never any killer hiding in the canal at all. The bubbles everyone saw were only coming from an oxygen tank left underwater. The killer had tricked the entire police force and escaped from the other side long before they realized it. For the past 3 months, the police had been hunting a psychopath, and once again, he had slipped right through their fingers. The realization fills the police chief with rage, but there's no time to dwell on failure now. So, together with Eric, he dives straight back into the investigation and swears that this time, no matter what happens, they will capture the psycho killer for good. But before their car can even travel very far, an emergency call suddenly comes through on the police radio. A patrol officer reports seeing a suspicious diver secretly entering an abandoned factory nearby. The moment he hears this, the police chief knows it has to be their killer. Eric immediately turns the car around and speeds toward the deserted factory at full throttle. After arriving at the location and confirming the suspect is still inside, both officers draw their weapons and cautiously enter the dark factory. Then they split up to search for the killer separately. A few moments later, the police chief discovers an important clue. Near a wash basin, he finds blood-soaked clothes, making it clear that the killer has just changed outfits. But before he can react, the killer suddenly appears behind him him and fires a harpoon gun. Without saying a single word, the spear shoots forward at lightning speed, barely missing the police chief by inches. Right after the attack, the killer immediately runs toward the back exit to escape. Hearing the noise, Eric rushes over and quickly removes the harpoon. Luckily, the spear only got stuck in the chief's sleeve, meaning he narrowly escaped death. The two officers immediately chase the killer outside, but by the time they get there, he has already climbed onto his speedboat, and before they can do anything, the killer takes off across the canal at full speed. Furious, the police chief instantly opens fire, shooting round after round at the fleeing boat, but not a single bullet hits the target. Without wasting a second, Eric jumps onto another boat and immediately begins chasing the killer. But before the police chief can even sit down properly, Eric slams the throttle at full speed, causing the chief to lose balance and fall straight into the water. But the situation is far too serious for Eric to stop now. Soon, a brutal high-speed chase begins in the middle of the canal. Sometimes the killer pulls ahead, and sometimes Eric gets right behind him again. Both men are equally skilled at handling their speedboats, making it nearly impossible for either one to gain the upper hand. Realizing Eric refuses to back off, the killer suddenly makes a dangerous 180-degree turn, hoping to throw him off the chase. But Eric is no amateur. He smoothly regains control of the boat, and once again gets right behind the killer. Seeing his trick fail, the killer suddenly speeds toward a crowded tourist area filled with civilians and smaller boats. Eric is forced to slow down to avoid crashing into innocent people, and that single moment becomes the killer's chance to escape farther away. Now, the killer starts believing he's going to get away once again, but while trying to escape, he becomes so focused on fleeing that he completely fails to notice a massive oil tanker coming straight toward him, and in the very next second, his speedboat crashes directly into it. The collision triggers a massive explosion, sending flames bursting across the canal. When Eric arrives moments later, he assumes the killer has finally burned to death in the fire, but then his eyes suddenly catch movement nearby. To his horror, he realizes the monster is still alive and is crawling into a narrow sewer pipe to escape. With no other option, Eric follows him into the filthy, foul-smelling tunnel. Using only a lighter to see through the darkness, he slowly moves deeper inside while searching for signs of the killer. A few moments later, he discovers a blood-covered t-shirt lying on the ground. Now Eric knows for certain that the killer is hiding somewhere nearby. Following the trail of blood, he eventually reaches the bottom of a deep pit. As he looks upward, he suddenly realizes something horrifying. The killer is standing directly above him. Eric instantly rushes toward the ladder and begins climbing upward, but just as he's about to reach the top, the killer suddenly fires a gun at him. The bullet hits Eric, and he screams in pain, but even then, he refuses to give up and immediately fires back. Then suddenly, everything goes dark. When Eric finally opens his eyes again, he finds himself lying in a hospital bed. Standing beside him are his girlfriend and the police chief. The very first thing Eric asks after waking up is whether they caught the killer, but the police chief sadly explains that when the officers arrived at the scene, all they found was Eric lying unconscious and badly injured, along with the shattered pieces of diving goggles nearby. The killer had disappeared once again. Thankfully, Eric is now out of danger, so the police chief heads back out to continue the hunt for the murderer. Meanwhile, Eric's girlfriend, who has already been struggling with depression, takes a taxi alone to visit her psychologist, but the doctor still hasn't returned home. While waiting, she casually wanders through the house, until suddenly she notices a hidden door. The moment she peeks inside, her blood freezes. Inside the room lies a blood-covered diving suit, along with a broken diving mask sitting beside it. At that exact moment, she remembers something Eric had told her earlier. During the shootout, he had fired directly at the killer's diving goggles, and suddenly, everything connects. She realizes the horrifying truth. Her psychologist is the real serial killer. The realization sends chills through her entire body. Her hands begin shaking in fear. She immediately tries calling the hospital to warn Eric somehow, but before she can do anything, she hears the sound of a car stopping outside the house. The psychologist has returned home. Terrified, the girl quickly hides. A few moments later, she quietly sneaks into the basement and hides there, desperately waiting for Eric to arrive. But while hiding, she makes one fatal mistake. Without noticing, her foot accidentally kicks a metal can lying on the floor, sending it crashing loudly across the basement. The moment he hears the noise, the doctor realizes someone is inside the house. He immediately pulls out a pistol and slowly begins walking toward the sound. Meanwhile, back at the hospital, Eric is informed by a nurse about what's happening. The second he hears this, he ignores all of his injuries, grabs the police chief, and rushes toward the doctor's house as fast as possible. Throughout the entire drive, only one terrifying thought fills his mind. He's terrified something might happen to his girlfriend. At the same time, the doctor finally reaches the basement. There, he notices the fallen metal can, and nearby, he spots drops of blood leading behind a cabinet. Slowly, he moves closer and checks behind it, but nobody is there. For a moment, he thinks someone fooled him, but But suddenly, the girl jumps out from behind and smashes a boat paddle directly onto his hand with all her strength. The impact sends the doctor's gun flying across the room. She continues attacking him again and again until he finally collapses unconscious onto the floor. The girl breathes a sigh of relief, but in the very next second, a huge water tank behind her suddenly explodes with a violent blast. And then, a mysterious figure wearing a diving suit emerges from the water. Without hesitation, the killer grabs the girl by her legs and starts dragging her underwater. Terrified, she desperately clings to the ladder, trying with all her strength not to be pulled in, but against the killer's monstrous power, she slowly begins losing her grip. And just then, Eric finally arrives. Without wasting even a single second, he unloads his entire magazine into the killer, filling his body with bullets and finally ending the nightmare forever. At last, his girlfriend is saved. Later, when the doctor regains consciousness, he finally reveals the full truth. The killer was actually his closest friend, but 3 years earlier, a terrible accident had horribly disfigured his face. After that, people everywhere began mocking him, laughing at him, and reacting in fear whenever they saw him. Little by little, hatred and madness consumed his mind, until eventually, he turned into a ruthless serial killer. But no matter how clever or dangerous he became, in the end, he still had to pay for his crimes. And with that, the movie comes to an end. If you enjoyed this thrilling recap, then don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell icon for more insane movie recaps like this one.